Hi guys, it is Mr. Dave with the Ray Kitty Creation Workshop, and you are watching the Ray Kitty Science Project. Thanks for joining us again. I want to give a huge shout out to the wonderful team here at Studio 519. You guys are the best. I really appreciate you guys. They make me look as good as this can look. But you may notice that today it's a little bit dark in the studio. That's me because we are going to be working with some things that generate light. So we did want to have a dark and spooky studio today. So it is a little bit darker than usual, which means you have a little bit less glare coming off of this thing than usual. But we did that so you can kind of see the results of what we're doing just a little bit better, okay? Now today we are going to be talking about electricity. Now anytime I bring up electricity, if I'm working with students, if I'm doing a talk, whatever it is, I do want to mention safety, okay? Electricity, you want to be safe with electricity, okay? Electricity is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to experiment with. And you can have a lot of fun with electricity in a lot of safe ways, but you want to make sure that you have an adult with you, okay? So if you are a student or a kiddo watching the show, make sure that you have mom or dad with you. Make sure that you are not doing more than adults. This one's for you. Make sure you're not kind of overstepping or doing outside of your kind of range of knowledge with electricity, because even us adults can easily get hurt or start fires or terrible, terrible things with electricity. But I say all that to say it is and can be very safe and very fun and a wonderful way of demonstrating how things work, as long as you're being careful. Okay, now kids, when I say make sure you have an adult with you, that doesn't mean dad's sleeping on the couch and you're going to go put a fork in the outlet. That's not what we're talking, okay? Make sure they are present, they know what you're doing, okay? So we want to be safe with electricity. All the things that I'm doing here today are low voltage, okay? And so these are not really anything that will do a lot of damage, but even at low voltage, we'll show you that sometimes that electricity can cause heat, which can heat things up in a hurry, okay? So we've had this guy in here with us before. This is my little plasma globe, and we have worked with that one before. We have this guy here that we've also worked with before, but we're going to be demonstrating some different principles today. We're going to be working and doing some different things with these, okay? So when we talked about electricity before, you can kind of look back through some of our other episodes, and when we talked about electricity, we were primarily talking about our direct current electricity, okay? Which direct current electricity will flow in one direction, okay? Direct current flows in one direction. So if you had your battery, okay, this is a battery, don't make fun of my drawing. There's a little battery, looks kind of like a 9-volt battery, or kind of like maybe a pig in Roblox or something like that. But this little battery here is what is going to generate our electricity. Now, electricity is the movement of electrons, okay? Electrons are part of the atom, okay? Don't make fun of my atom drawing. Okay, now this is kind of an older version, the Bohr's model of the atom, but the electron is that little guy on the outside, okay? So that little guy that's zooming around the outside of that atom is called an electron, okay? Now that electron normally carries a negative charge, okay? Now if you look back, we just talked about magnets in another episode, and we talked about positives and negatives and polarity. It works the same way. So if you think about electricity in the same way you think about magnets, that's going to help a lot of the way that you understand electricity. Because just like on magnets, if you have a positive and a negative, they would attract, right? They would want to zap into each other, okay? But if you have a negative and a negative, kind of like those electrons we were talking about, they are going to want to push apart, okay? So electricity is those little electrons wanting to push apart. These little dots, you can imagine that they're electrons, okay? And so those electrons are wanting to push apart, okay? So if we have our negative side of the battery, those little electrons are trying to push away. Now, they have to have somewhere to go, so you have to create a circuit, okay? A circuit just means they're going to end up back where they started, and that is going to be, in this case, our little battery, okay? Now, this is in direct current when we're talking about direct current, okay? Now, today we're going to be looking at a lot of things that are direct current, but we're also going to be looking at a lot that are alternating current. Now, alternating current works just a little bit differently in that it kind of pushes them out, pushes them out, pushes them out, kind of like a traffic jam of those electrons, okay? How you picture that traffic jam, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. It works kind of, that's a simplified way of showing how that works, okay? So, when working with our electricity, okay, again, as I said, you always want to be careful. Make sure that you know what you're doing. Make sure that you have a safe area to work in. This guy here, before we move on to our alternating current, I mentioned that it works off direct current, okay? And this one here has a negative side, as is, in a lot of times we will use a black wire to show the negative side. It's got a little bitty battery in there. And we have our positive side. Now, right now, all of those electrons are there, but they're having a hard time moving because we don't have a circuit, okay? Now, a circuit is just like a circle, okay? Now, it can be any shape, but it has to end where it begins. Now, this little guy is fun because this is kind of a continuity tester. It can actually use my body as part of the circuit. Now, if you see here, I'm holding this connective part here, okay? This is the conductor, and this other side also has a conductor. Now, if I were to touch that, that electricity would actually flow through my body back to this, okay? Ready? So if I touch it, no, I'm just kidding, I'm okay. If I touch it, it is a very low current, so it's not doing any damage, but touching it shows that we have continuity, which means we have a circuit. Okay, so direct current flows in a circuit, and that's what is giving us that current. Okay, now we're going to see some fun things with this when they're not even touching in a little bit here. And we're going to start by kind of moving to this guy, and then we will get back to this one. Okay, now remember we had this one and we used this one before, the plasma ball, but we want to kind of show what's happening in that plasma ball, and we're going to show it a little bit different way, okay? Now, in a couple minutes here, this thing is loud, okay? This is actually a Tesla coil. This is a solid-state Tesla coil, okay? Now, Tesla was the inventor of it. This has nothing to do with Tesla, the cars, right? But this was Nikola Tesla invented this way of transmitting electricity wirelessly, okay? So it actually generates an electric field, just like we saw the magnetic field. If you look back and look at our episode on magnets, we talked about the magnetic field. This one, that electric field, is generated around this, and we'll kind of see that happening in some of the other things in just a little bit. But what happens with this particular one here, again, just like last time, I have to kind of say, hey, thanks to my brother and my sister-in-law for always buying me fun science toys. This one here, this is something, make sure you kind of have some fundamental electrical knowledge before you go out and purchase one of these, because there is live electricity that's happening here. Now, if you do see that electricity come in contact with me, I will be okay, okay? I will actually deliberately contact that electricity to show you that it is not at a frequency or at a voltage or wattage that can hurt me, okay? Now, what I'm hoping I don't do is slam my hand down on that really, really sharp spike that you see right there. Now, we have a very sharp spike for a reason, okay? That electricity is lazy. Think of electricity like water. This very sharp spike here, electricity is going to find the easiest way to get out, okay? So inside of this thing here, what we're doing is we're getting those electrons, just like we talked about in our direct current, we're getting those electrons, and inside of this thing, we are bouncing those electrons back and forth, okay? Bouncing them back and forth, faster, 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 faster. Now, eventually, they start moving fast enough that they jump out, okay? Now, the easiest point for this to jump out is this little bitty spike right here, okay? So that is where our little electrons are going to jump out, okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to plug this in. It will be kind of loud. You'll just hear a ticking at first, but I'm going to plug this guy in. And I'm going to plug it in over here too, because you got to plug in both ends so you have that circuit. So there's not much happening now. I'm going to gradually turn it up. And you may be able to see, if you look on here, that we already have those little lightning bolts jumping off of there. Okay? Now, this is on its kind of weakest setting. Now, you can see as I get closer to it that those lightning bolts are jumping to my hand. It's not doing any damage. It's not hurting me because it is a very low voltage. Okay? Now, I mean, it's a very low amperage. Okay? It's a very high voltage, but very low amperage. So we can see here that fun little spike jumping out of there. Now, you may also hear a very loud pop, 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 pop noise. Okay? Now, what's fun about that, that's nice. What's fun about that is that popping noise was happening pop, 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 just a couple times a second, okay? But what we can do is we can modulate, or we can decide the frequency that popping is going to happen. Now, if you remember when we did the one about waves, sound is waves, okay? When this is moving, it's actually causing pressure. That pop is a sound wave. So if we were to have that pop, instead of just going pop, 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 like that, if we were to speed that up and change the frequency, we're going to change the pitch. Okay? So we can change the frequency and we can change the pitch in this one. And I've got it Bluetooth over to my phone here. I promise I'm not just checking my Facebook. Oh, there's my no, okay. But I've got it Bluetooth to my phone there. And what we're going to do is I'm going to switch the setting over here. And so it'll take a second. This will hook up to the little Bluetooth there. We'll get that little blue light. We'll wait till that little blue light is done flashing. And what we're going to do is we're going to change how fast those little pops happen. When we change the frequency, how often they're happening, we're going to change the pitch. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play over here on my phone. This one will be loud. I'm just going to be quiet for a minute so you guys can hear this. Oh, you'll be able to hear it, but so I'm not trying to talk over it. All right, so here we go. I'm going to be quiet. Okay, now I could listen to that one all day, but what we have here was that same thing was happening as with that popping sound, okay? Except we were changing the frequency. So it was happening very quickly, and that high-speed popping sound gave us that nice different so when we change the frequency, we change the pitch, okay? So this little guy here, this is a fun one, but what I want to do is I'm going to turn the speed down quite a bit here so we just have an occasional pop, because I want to kind of look at the shape of those pops there, okay? Now, when you look, you'll see that they're shooting out like lightning bolts, okay? They look like little lightning bolts in here, right? So I want you to pay attention to that shape, okay? That shape of those lightning bolts, because when we go to some of these other ones, you're going to see that shape again. Now what's fun is, remember I said this is a wireless transmission of electricity. What we can see is I can light this little bitty bulb way over here. You can see that bulb flashing, okay? And what's happening is it is wirelessly transmitting that electricity. Okay, I've got this guy here, and you can actually see it come up that thing there and kind of dance up that thing as it shoots up this little rod here. And what it's doing is it's jumping up from one to another, and we can see it bouncing in there. Yeah, so that electricity is going from little peg to little peg. This one here, we can see quite a bit. Look at that little like electricity dance in there, okay? We can see that popping in that bulb there, and that one gives us a fun one as that thing is lighting up. So it's transmitting that electricity. That's better. It's transmitting that electricity through the air, okay? Now, this same technology, a little bit different, is the same way that you can wirelessly charge your phones, and you can, that kind of thing. This was a way of distributing electricity that was discovered and worked on a long, long time ago, but it isn't used very often, even still today. There's just some kind of crazy things about that. So this little Tesla coil, we saw that as that was kind of jumping off of this point right here, and that is where I want to end up getting into this guy here, okay? So this one here is our plasma globe, okay? Now, we had this one on before, and maybe you guys have seen these. Maybe you guys have played with these. This is a fun one, but what I want to show you are some similarities between this and that other little Tesla coil. Now, a plasma globe is actually a Tesla coil, okay? Now, if you look in here, we have that rod. This is the same idea as that Tesla coil, but what happens is we have this vacuum here that is a different pressure than we have outside here, and they will put different noble gases in depending on the brand, depending on the size. One of them is often krypton, right, which is fun because that shows that it's not kryptonite, but it is krypton, and they will have different gases in here. And what those gases do is, because we don't have that easy distribution of those electrons, is it kind of makes, instead of that little pop of those lightning bolts that was happening very quickly, it slows it down. Okay? So, did you see something happen? Hang on. I'm going to move this over here for just a minute. We'll talk about that part in a minute. Okay, now, you may be able to see a little bit of light in there, but when I get closer, just like you saw that little lightning bolt that was going to my hand, we see that movement as it is going toward my hand there. Now, picture that little ball that you see on the center to be the same as this little bitty needle that we had here. Okay? The same thing is happening, but because of our difference in the gases there, it's going a lot slower. Now, if you see all of these little spines that are going up, okay, it looks like I'm going to tell your future. If you see all these little spines here, each of those is just like that little lightning bolts that were shooting off of that Tesla coil, okay? They're the same thing that's happening here, and what they're doing is they're looking kind of for that little magnetic field there, a way to transmit that electricity. Now, remember we needed a circuit, right? For electricity to be able to continue moving those electrons. They actually will follow kind of that magnetic current, and they will follow that, and they are going toward Earth, okay? When I say Earth, Earth is the term we use. We use the term Earth, we use the term ground, but they're heading for the same thing. Now, the reason that when I touch it, it comes toward my hand here is because I am an easier way to reach the ground, okay? I'm an easier way to get to ground. So the reason we see this nice big arc here that's going to my hand is because now it's found the easiest way. Remember, as I said, electricity is lazy, okay? Just like water, if you've ever seen a river or anything like that, or if you're in your yard, a way to kind of demonstrate electricity is to put the hose on the ground in the dirt, and you will see that it will follow the easiest path in the sand. Now, if there's a rock in the way, it's going to kind of go around and then will eventually draw a nice, beautiful river pattern there. But electricity, like water, is always going to find the easiest path, okay? And that's the way that a lot of our electronics will work, is by finding the easiest path between transistors and things like that for that electricity to flow the way that they want it to. So the same thing is happening here. Electricity is looking for the easy way out, okay? It is looking for the way to find the ground the quickest. So this right here is just like that popping you saw, but because it's happening through that gas, it is happening at a lot slower visible rate. Now you may notice something. When you see all these little like spinies here and these cool little hair-like things that are coming out, they're all moving, but they're all moving upward. You can kind of trace one. If you find one, you can kind of trace it, and they're all moving upward. Okay? Now the reason they're moving upward in here is because of heat. Okay? As that heats the air around it, okay, then you've got higher energy, so it wants to follow that higher energy, and it's now following that higher energy up, and that's why they keep kind of moving up. Or when I put my hand on here, we can see that we have the arc ending at my hand, but it is continually rising and rising, okay? That's because that higher energy level, and it wants to follow that higher energy level up and up and up, okay? Now this electricity, when we were talking about our direct current and our alternating current, this works off of an alternating current, okay? So the frequency on this is very high. Remember how we heard that pop, 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 and we talked about changing the frequency and changing how often it happens? Well, it is a very high frequency because those little electrons are bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth across a little gap, okay? And they're bouncing back and forth, and they get faster and faster and faster until they're jumping out. Remember, just like they were in that one? Now this one, when they're jumping out, because it's across that gas, we can see a lot of them. So it's not just one. We're seeing an entire, like a river is a whole bunch of little bitty drops of water, right? So we see the same thing here. This river is a whole bunch of little bitty drops of water. So this is a lot of those electrons emitting the photons, which the photons are the light, and that is what is giving us this little fun upward pattern, okay? Now, this one I can touch. That can touch me for a long time. It's not really generating much heat. That one there, if I turn it up and I keep my hand in it, remember how you saw that one was able to hit my hand? If I were to keep my hand in it and maybe grab that little bitty tip of that thing for a while, that would get pretty hot, okay? And we'll talk about the heat that this is actually generating in just a minute. But I want to show you something. Remember how we were able to light these little bitty lights with our Tesla coil? Now, I don't know, this one here, oh, we do actually have enough here. If you look, if you can see this light right here, outside of the globe, we can actually see this thing light up, okay? So I'm not touching it. I've got a little bit of space there, and we can see that light begin to light up. Now, when I make contact, I get more light, right? But we are still wirelessly transmitting those electrons. Those electrons, even though we don't see them out here, they're still being transmitted out here. And we know that because I gave you a spoiler a little bit earlier. Oh. We know that because those electrons are generating or creating a circuit. Okay? These guys are not touching. Remember how they had to touch before? They're not touching, but because of those electrons that are in the air here, right? That electron or electromagnetic field, that electromagnetic field is giving us the continuity and is allowing this one to light up and make the sound. Now watch when I turn this guy off. We're outside of that field and we don't have that contact. When I turn it back on, we're inside that field, and so that electricity is actually being transmitted this far. Now we're going to go for wider. We're going to see how far this little guy is generating that field, okay? And we're going to do that by just moving away. Now, as you can see, we are still generating that field. Now, a tricky thing is happening here. I am actually part of this field now. So even when I go further, it's able to use myself as a conduit, okay? If you play Sony video games, you'll get that one. But I am a conduit that is now causing this to happen way over here. So I can move this way, way close to the end of the frame there, come over here, and when I am in contact with this, we can see that I am a conduit there, and I am actually able to transmit that electricity over my body to be that conduit, even though I'm not touching this. Okay? So that electricity, that alternating current, has an easy time going through the air. Now, alternating current we don't use too often in most of our everyday devices because it doesn't go in a nice little line. Now, I brought my cell phone here. I'm actually going to power it down. I'm not going to be checking my Facebook. But these devices will not use an alternating current because they need that direct current, just like we were showing that flow of water. They need that direct current for that electricity so they know where it's going to go, so it can follow that path through all those little transistors and fancy technological magic that's going on in there. Now, out of this thing here, this is plugged, it goes all the way into the wall over there. This is actually alternating current, okay? But our devices can't use alternating current. So you probably have these all over your house. I call them a wall wart. I don't know. It's just an old thing that we used to call them. But a wall wart, what this thing does is this is a transformer, okay? Now, this is not a robot in disguise. This is just a little piece of plastic with some, we'll get into the other one when we talk about generating that electricity. But what this does is this changes the alternating current over to direct current, okay? So the direct current is what we can use in our devices. The alternating current is what we use to transfer electricity over long distances, and that is super important because if you're like me, you love video games and you want to make sure that power is getting all the way to your house so you can play more video games, okay? So we talked about direct current, okay? Direct current flows in one direction. We talked about alternating current, right? That current pushing through. Alternating current is how we get the power to our house. Direct current is usually how we use it, okay? So I am Mr. Dave. Thank you for watching the Ray Kitty Science Project. And don't forget, science shows you matter.